start doing keyword research to understand how to find the keywords people are typing into Google to find products and services just like yours. So what is keyword research? Keyword research is the process of determining which keywords your business should target through PPC on Google. It will show you how many people are searching for those terms as well as the expected costs involved in terms of bidding for those keywords. Because on Google, although it's an auction and essentially, as I mentioned, the highest bidder plus quality score wins in terms of that ad rank, ultimately, it's important to understand how much that click is potentially going to cost. What is the cost of the higher end or the lower end of that auction? Keyword research helps us determine these numbers, which again, as I mentioned with the campaign planning tool, to understand where the line of profitability is, your cost of click is going to be one of those key elements in terms of determining whether or not your campaign could be profitable. And that is what keyword research helps you determine, which words to target and how much they're estimated to cost as well. So if we introduce keyword research into the equation, first of all, you will need to understand how people potentially could search for your business. The first starting point is, what would you type into Google to find your products and services yourself through the eyes of a customer? If you went to Google looking for what you do, what would you type in? That is the starting point for keyword research, which is an interesting thing to do. It's an exercise a lot of businesses don't actually do very often, and it can kind of make sure that you are in the right place at the right time for the user once you understand how they search for your potential keywords for your business. Now, there's a caveat to this. Although it is the starting point for keyword research, and I'll explain in a moment when I demonstrate a full keyword research activity to you why that's the starting point. However, what you think people type into Google may and often is different to what people actually search for. They're sometimes worlds apart. There's also variations of how people search to consider as well. The way people phrase things, the way people use certain structures of sentence to look for particular products and services. Things you may not have thought of, even though you're doing this exercise of going through Google through the eyes of a customer, ultimately how you think they're going to find your business. That's a starting point. Google actually holds the data in terms of how people look for services just like yours. So that's why you need a tool to determine this and get that data. So now we introduce the Keyword Planner, which is a tool I mentioned at the beginning when we were talking about creating a Google Ads account without having to put your card details in order to get access to this very tool, because this tool, the Google Keyword Planner, is going to be incredibly crucial. The Keyword Planner is the tool you would use for keyword research. It's all of Google's keyword data based on historical keyword performance from different advertisers. It allows you to see search volumes, cost, and importantly as well, competition levels to see how effective it would be to bid for a particular keyword if the competition levels are high and the costs are going to be high as well. It allows you to see all of that data and also research potential options for keywords to target within your campaigns as well. So you can discover new keywords. When you go into the Keyword Planner, which we're about to do in a moment, there are two options in the planner. You can either discover new keywords by giving Google a list of things to target and seeing what they come up with, or you can get existing forecasts and volumes from an existing keyword list. Both options are very, very useful for keyword research because they take two different approaches. So to elaborate, to discover new keywords, you need to enter your potential list of keywords. Remember I mentioned that you need to think about how customers could potentially find your business. This is why, because that seed list of keywords you're going to give Google of ways customers may find your business is going to allow Google to extrapolate that list massively and return dozens and dozens of potential keywords to target as well. So that's why you need to go through that exercise. You give Google a sample of those keywords you thought of, or your website URL, or even both, and Google will use that data to find relevant keywords you could potentially target. Now, one of the things to be aware of when you do this is that a lot of these keywords may not be relevant, and you have to go through an exercise of deciding which ones you want to include and which ones you want to omit from your keyword strategy. And that's part of keyword research, which is why it's such an important part of Google advertising. The second option is to get search volume. So this is if you have a seed list of keywords already and you want to kind of understand how they would perform on Google in terms of costings, volumes, and competition as well. So all of the data you would get normally when asking Google to discover new keywords. So you'll need to generate a list of keywords yourself. So there are two approaches, as I say. Give Google a sample of keywords, they create an extrapolated list, and you filter through that sample of keywords. or you can build a keyword list yourself based on what you think people are typing in and extrapolating that list by using a tool I'll also show you to concatenate keywords together to make mixes and variations of the different ways people search for your products and services. Both methods have their merit, and we're going to look at both methods in order to determine our potential keyword list. So up next, we're going to work through both methodologies and build a keyword list for a business. So when I go through this activity, you're going to do it for your business, and I'm going to do it for the plumbing business, of which the page we did the conversion rate optimization for. So we're going to understand how to build a keyword list for that business, and through doing that, you'll understand how to do it for your business as well. Okay, so here I am in our newly created Google Ads account, and the first part of keyword research is, first of all, understanding how Google pulls out keywords from potential queries. So for this example, we are going to build a campaign around boiler servicing. So as a service for our plumbing website, we're going to create a campaign for boiler servicing, and every campaign creation starts with keyword research. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is go over to Tools and Settings and then go into the Keyword Planner. Now this has two options when it loads, as I mentioned in the previous section. I'll just click on this and there we go. We're in. So now this has two options, as I mentioned in the previous section. So the first option is to discover new keywords. You give Google a sample of example keywords you want to create a campaign for. And then the other option is to get search volume and forecasts based on a predetermined list of keywords. I'm going to show you methodologies of how to use both of these methods to build a keyword list. And ultimately, I tend to use a mixture of both to gauge in terms of volumes overall and also simplicity of building the list. So the first thing I'm going to click on is discover new keywords. As I mentioned, we're going to start off with boiler servicing. So let's get started, first of all, by typing that in as an example keyword. First of all, you can see here, your location is set to your account location. This campaign will be for the United Kingdom, so that's correct. Before you start your keyword research, ensure that this is correct and your language as well, because that's going to affect the data you're going to get back from Google. So let's get started. So if I type in boiler service, boiler servicing, all I'm doing is adding a comma and pressing space, and that creates a new keyword in this list. So that gives me two example keywords potentially I can use. That's all I need. You can also input your URL here as well to filter out keywords that are potentially unrelated. I don't tend to do this because Google aren't very good at doing this. So I just tend to get all of Google's data and comb through it in order to see what kind of keywords we can bid on. So if I click on Get Results, that is going to pull out Google's data set that they have on keywords in this kind of niche. So you'll see, first of all, the first row shows the keyword you provided, which is boiler service. So that's the first keyword I provided, and it shows the metrics. Now, average monthly searches is an estimation based on Google's search data that they hold on people's behavior on Google. Now, this data is usually very, very underrepresented. It's very underestimated. Generally speaking, the volume will be much higher than this because this usually uses exact match data. People are typing in the query you're seeing below here exactly, as opposed to variations or close variants of that keyword. So generally speaking, when you run a campaign, the data will be higher than the average monthly searches you can see here. You can see 3-month change in terms of how much the volume of the keywords has increased or decreased over time. This particular campaign doesn't really see much variance. You can see that some, for example, electric boiler installation has seen a plus 900% increase. So if you were in that industry, you might be seeing some growth there in terms of people looking for this particular service. And then boiler care, that particular keyword, has seen a 90% decrease in 3-month change in terms of volume. Same goes for year-on-year change. Instead of 3 months, it's just over a 12-month period. Competition is an important one because it gives you an indication of how many competitors are aggressively bidding on these keywords. Medium, high, and low rates the levels of competition. So with a keyword like boiler repair, for example, you can expect a lower CPC generally. However, that's not always the case, which I'll go on to in a moment. But this gives you an indication in terms of competition. Some people use this as an indication for SEO as well. Personally, I don't do that, but I think it's a good metric to understand the volume of keywords. Next, you're going to have your impression share. That is if you're running a campaign already and these keywords are in your campaign, you'll get a population of the impression share received in your campaign. We'll go on to impression share as a metric going forward in the course, but just to make you aware that this column won't populate unless you're running ads with the keyword already in it, where it will show the impression share you're currently getting. The next two columns are going to be really important. That's going to determine your potential cost of traffic. So you have your top of page bid, low range, like how much would it cost you for a click to show in the top 4 positions on the Google search results in the low range. So you'll see here the estimations of click costs from anywhere from boiler service near me at £2.06. And you'll see things as high as £4.97 for boiler replacement, because of course that's a more premium service. Advertisers are more likely to spend more money on getting clicks for that service. And then the high-end range is basically from auctions that have gone through historically, how the high-end bids have affected the top 4 positions. So generally speaking, advertisers can pay anywhere between £3.07 and £10.41 for the particular keyword boiler repair I'm hovering over now. But that varies depending on auction and a number of other factors. But this is Google's variance in the data. It shows the low end and the high end to set expectations correctly. So here's our potential keyword list for this campaign. You can see boiler service near me, boiler repair near me, British gas boiler repair. If you scroll further down, you can see things like SSE boiler repair, emergency boiler repair, boiler inspection, gas heating engineer. So you can see it doesn't just cover the exact terms I put in terms of boiler service, it covers all types of term. And in fact, what I'm going to do now is we're going to download the list and take a look at it in more detail to really understand this data. So I'm going to click on this option to download keyword ideas into a CSV file, which will give me a way to view the data more effectively and potentially sort the data as well, and basically prepare it for use to make my keyword list. But we're going to go through a couple of options back in the keyword planner after we've done this to kind of show you potentially how you can refine your keywords as well. So the report is currently downloading, and once that's downloaded, we'll be able to open that up in Excel and go through the data. So that's now downloaded. I'm going to open that up now and we're going to look at the data. So I'm going to drag that over from my other screen. And here's the data. It basically reflects what we've just seen already. So I'm going to tidy this up a bit, removing the first 2 rows by highlighting cell 1 and row 1 and 2, right-clicking, clicking delete, and removing those 2 rows. We know our currency already, so I'll delete that because it's irrelevant. You will know the currency you're using as well. I'm going to delete all of these other areas as well, because you've got organic impression share as well, and all these other kind of metrics that are based on your exact accounts if you're running these keywords. But we're not doing that now. We're looking at researching before starting an account, so I will delete these as well. So now it's easier to see, and if I double click between cell A and B, I'll expand so I can see the keyword list. So as we go down, we can actually, I think the first thing we'll do is sort by volume. So if I click on data and then click on filter, I'll actually sort by average monthly searches to see what the most popular keywords are compared to others. So I'll go largest to smallest. So now we can understand where all the volume in the campaign potentially can come from. But as you can probably see, there are many keywords in here that I would not bid on in my campaign. Here are some examples. I would not bid on anything to do with British Gas Home Care, because that is a pay monthly service from British Gas. Of course, if you're not in the UK, you won't know who British Gas are, but they're the biggest energy provider for boilers in the UK. They have service packages, and this relates to their service package. So that is a branded term that people are potentially looking for directly for British Gas to fulfill that need. Now, there are other things as well, potentially, like SSE, which is another energy provider. They do their own services as well. I might not necessarily want that. There are a ton of other brands in here, like smaller brands like D&G, who I've never really heard of, but you can assume they are a brand as well. So if I keep going down through the keywords as the volume starts to decrease, you'll see things like free central heating. Definitely don't want that keyword. I don't want to provide free heating in my campaign. So this just provides a bit of a problem. So as you can see here in this data set, there are a ton of keywords in here that are not relevant to the campaign. So we need to refine this list. And what we're going to do next is actually go ahead and refine this list down to a seed list of keywords we can potentially bid on in this arena. Okay, so I'm going to jump back into the Google Ads keyword planner because there are a couple of things we need to do to refine this list that will help us get our seed keyword list. So now I'm in here, I'm back in the keyword planner. There's an option on the right-hand side panel here called Refine Keywords, which will allow us to filter the keywords to find the ones that we want to use. The first one's going to be one of the most important ones in this particular campaign because, as I mentioned, there are a ton of branded keywords in here that are not relevant to our campaign. You might want to bid on branded keywords in terms of competing brands to your business to help you get more clicks and sales, which is great. But in this particular niche, if I bid on British Gas terms, I'm going to burn through my budget pretty quickly because they're the biggest provider in the UK and they offer bespoke services in terms of coverage and monthly payments. So again, it goes back to understanding your industry, and you will understand your industry very well. So you will know exactly whether or not you should or shouldn't be bidding on particular competitors. So if I click this drop down option for brand or non-brand, I'm going to be met with a ton of filters. Now, these filters will allow me to refine the keyword list. Now, the first one is for everything in the list. We wouldn't untick this because if I untick this option, we're basically left with nothing because I've removed all branded and non-branded keywords from this list. Now I'll retick that so you can see they will reappear. Now, as you go down this list, you'll see all of the big brands like Bosch, Valent, and all the other kind of bigger names in the boiler industry. I know you probably don't know who these people are if you're not in the UK, or even if you are in the UK, you might not necessarily know who these people are. But they are the biggest brands in the industry. And as you go down, you can see more companies like British Gas, SSE, EDF. So you've got brands of boiler in terms of who make the boilers. Then you've got companies who install the boilers. And then you've got contractors who are smaller businesses who fit boilers. So they've identified these brands as smaller contractors, and then other brands of boilers as well. You can see there's plenty of other smaller brands that do boiler installation as well. So what you can do with this option is you can actually untick all non-brands, sorry, all branded keywords. So if I untick brand, that means all of these potential boiler manufacturers are no longer in our keyword list. Now, you might want to bid on keywords like install Bosch boiler or install Baxi boiler because people know which boiler they actually want. So you might want to include those. In that case, you would tick this option. For the purposes of this, I'm going to include the boiler manufacturers because that's going to help us identify more customers who are willing to install these particular types of boiler. If I didn't provide these boilers in my service, then I would untick the ones that are not applicable. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to leave these brands of boiler ticked. The next one is company. I've mentioned before that a lot of these companies are huge and would eat up all of my budget and not allow me to spend effectively on more buyer keywords as opposed to competitor keywords. You might want to bid on competitors. That's okay. You can leave these options ticked. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to untick this box. Now, this one is for smaller competitors, really small contractors, really small competitors. So I will happily untick this as well because these are small competitors who might not be in the same space as me. They might not have boiler service as their main service. So they might have things like gas engineering, or maybe they install bathrooms, or maybe they do other kinds of plumbing. That's their main service. I don't actually know. So I'm not going to take the risk and advertise against their keywords until I start checking them out in a bit more detail. So I'm going to untick contractors as well. And as we untick, you can see the keyword list refreshes and then it shows less results because of this filter. Now, as you go down, you're going to see other brands as well. So these are other brands of potential boilers and contractors as well. So for example, Checker Trade, that is a service comparison website here in the UK that compares different companies who provide home services like boiler installation, like we're doing now. So all of these types of keyword, I'm not going to add into my campaign because a lot of these are not going to be relevant. They're going to be things that are going to be not quite in line with what I want for my campaign because they are service providers who might be quite large, and they're also governing bodies as well. So Corgi, for example, are a gas, or at least they were a gas safety engine, a gas safety registration. So a lot of these aren't going to be necessarily relevant. So I'm going to untick this. And that refines our keyword list even further. So now I'm comfortably happy that I've got non-branded keywords in my account, apart from the manufacturer of boilers, which I'll look at as we go down and go through the list. So now I've done that section of brand versus non-brand, I can collapse this, and you can also go into services as well. So boiler repair, boiler installation, maintenance, replacement, fault finding, and inspection. They are all things I'm happy with in my campaign, so I'll keep those ticked. And you go to system boiler, combi boiler, back boiler. These are all different types of boiler. You want to keep boiler in there, but then if you don't provide services for all of these different types of boiler, then you want to remove those particular keywords. So I'll keep them in because we provide services for all different types. Then you've got energy sources. Ours is gas engineering, so I'm going to untick oil and untick electric as well. And that refines the keyword list even further. And then finally, you've got others. So you've got prices, water, plumbing, commercial. We don't do commercial, so I'll untick commercial for this particular campaign. You've got industrial, I'll untick that as well. So this will really help you refine your list down based on the services you do or you don't provide. So this is a good way to start. Then you've got air, you've got month, you've got valve, you've got all these other different types of subcategories. I'm going to keep them in there. In fact, I'll get rid of water. Actually, I'll keep water in there because it might be quite relevant to what we're doing in this example. So I'll keep this in, and you've seen here now that I've refined the keyword list down to 712 keywords. Now, all I need to do is download this keyword list in order to see what my final keyword list could look like. This may still need refining, but I've used Google's filters to help me refine it even better. So I'm going to download these keyword ideas now, and we'll take a look at them to see if there's still refinement needed. Okay, so I've downloaded that keyword list. Let's take a look at it now. So I'm going to open this, and it will open in Excel as it did last time. So if I click on the top 2 rows and highlight them and then delete them, and then delete the currency column, and then delete these blank columns that are based on data if I was running the campaign, and then double click between A and B, then that will give us our list. If I click on cell A2 and hold down Control and Shift at the same time, then press down, that will highlight all the keywords in the list. And then if you look at the corner of Excel down here, you can see there are 712 keywords in the list, which is fantastic because that is exactly what we want. But let me go through a few examples of what I mean by we still need to refine this list, because there are going to be tons of keywords in here that we do not want to bid on. So let's have a look. First of all, you can see here, there's going to be keywords like this one, which is Patel Boiler Services. Now, we removed brands and smaller contractors from this list, remember. Google didn't get all of them, evidently. As you can see, there's another one called Dromore Boilers. So they're not high volume, but ultimately, these are terms that we do not want to appear for in our campaign. So all of these potentially types of term are things we don't want to bid on. So the refinement process when you build your keyword list is to go through your seed list of keywords, so all 700 and 712 keywords that we have in this list, and go through and comb through very carefully which ones are relevant, which ones are not relevant, and omit the ones that are not relevant, because that's going to be really important as part of your research, because you only want to bid on keywords you think are going to give you returns and sales. So things like Worcester Bosch Boiler Service is fantastic. It includes the brand of boiler that we mentioned before. We want to bid on terms like this. And then as you go down, as I say, you're going to find keywords in here that aren't necessarily needed or things that you might want to remove. So for example, here's a perfect example of a keyword you might want to remove. Cheap boiler installation. Now, if you provide cheap boiler installation and you don't mind a customer who's after a deal, this can be a great keyword for you. But if you know your service is premium, you do not want to bid on this keyword. So it's a bit of a thought process you need to take when going through your keyword list. It's really important to go through and understand that even if a keyword might be relevant to the industry or to maybe one of your competitors, it may not be relevant to you. So you need to actually go through and check some of these keywords. So that's the second activity you need to do, is look at keywords that aren't necessarily wrong, but could not be right for your business. So there are tons of keywords to go through, and it's a process you're going to have to get used to as a Google Ads expert. You don't just want to do your keyword research on Google, take all the keywords and drop them in, even though that's something Google would probably like you to do because you end up spending more money and potentially wasting your budget. That's not necessarily something you'd want to do. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and comb through this keyword list and cut out all of the keywords that do not make sense for my business, including smaller brands, services that aren't necessarily relevant, and other things like that. And that is going to help us with our keyword research. And the next part of this would be to group the keywords. So that will come later. But let's first of all get involved and start removing keywords that are not relevant to this campaign. So here I am back in the spreadsheet, and I've not shown you the refinement list yet. I want to show you exactly what I mean by refining. So as I mentioned, we refined the keywords down using the filters in Google's Keyword Planner. And since then, we've downloaded it, gone onto this spreadsheet, and my job to show you was to refine this keyword list even further. Remember, the focus of this campaign is boiler servicing or boiler service. So that means any keyword that isn't relevant to that specific service that this campaign is going to be for needs to be removed. So I've gone through the process, first of all, with a filter, and I've done a filter for service. And that kind of gave me a very good benchmark of what to do. So once I did that, it was a case of taking this list and refining it further, making sure everything in there was highly relevant to boiler servicing without including any small contractors or smaller brands, because we don't want to target that in this campaign. If we wanted to, I would set up a separate competitor campaign to more effectively manage the budget. So with that said, I've done the refinement process and put it onto this sheet here. So now we've gone from about 650 keywords in the previous sheet down to, if I hold Control and Shift on cell A2 and then press down to, as we can see here on the count, 154 keywords. This is our final keyword list. Everything in here is relevant to the campaign. So you can see now how we've gone from putting a few keywords into the Google Keyword Planner, and then it comes back with over 1,000 keywords, using Google's filters, coming back with 700 or so keywords, refining that further in terms of making sure the focus of the campaign is covered. And now we're down to this keyword list. Now it's important to remember, you may hear from Google representatives that you should be bidding on all of the keywords that you saw in that 1,000 list, or even the 700 list. Now many of those weren't relevant, meaning you would waste your budget. This list is going to be everything focused around your campaign and your focus and your goals. So this is your main keyword list. You need to go through this process with your business as well. If you're finding your keyword list for a specific campaign is getting into the 700s or the thousands in terms of keyword count, then it's probably likely you haven't refined your keyword list enough. So here we are. Here is our seed keyword list for the campaign. The next step is to refine this even further, because we need to group these keywords into effective ad groups. Remember, ad groups allow us to effectively group our keywords into themed groups, meaning our ad copy can be more targeted. And what I mean by that is we have generic keywords like boiler service. You have keywords that contain things like annual. You have keywords that contain things like brands like Glowworm or Baxi. So we need to refine this further in order to make sure we're covering the right kinds of keyword. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and do that next. So now we have our themed keyword list. It's important for us now to group them into effective ad groups. Now remember, ad groups group keywords into more effectively relevant subgroups and subcategories from your main seed keyword list, meaning we can write ad copy that's more relevant to the keywords themselves. Now, the way to do this is to, first of all, start looking through the keyword list and finding themes. So the first theme I'm seeing here is Valent boiler service. Now, Valent is one of the branded keywords that came out of our research. It's a brand of boiler and it's a popular brand here in the UK. So this makes sense to have an ad group so that when people go and type in Valent boiler service, considering that we do service those boilers as our example business, it makes sense for us to have an ad targeted specifically to that keyword to make us more relevant, to make people click us more, to make our quality scores better, to get cheaper traffic. So let's start off by creating a secondary sheet, and we're going to start grouping these keywords. So if I click into this button here, I'm going to type in Valent as a heading here. And in fact, we're going to have a grouping for each keyword type underneath each of these headings. So we're going to start with Valent, but I'm going to make all of these a heading. So I'm going to change this to black and change the text color to white. So this will be the heading for each of our ad groups. And within here, we'll list all of the relevant keywords from our keyword research underneath each column. And that will group everything very nicely into ad groups. So starting off with Valent, we will do a search in this filter for Valent. So if we start typing that in and hit OK, that filters all the keywords with the word Valent in, which is perfect because that is exactly what we need. These are our Valent keywords. So I'm going to copy those. I'm going to paste them into here. And that is our Valent ad group keywords. These will be the keywords in our Valent ad group. Now, if we go back here and then remove this filter, those keywords are still in this area, in this list, so we don't want to target them again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the drop down here where it says keyword. I'm going to type Valent in again. And this time what I'm going to do is select all of them. And I'm going to change the color to red. It's the default name is bad. Doesn't mean these are bad keywords. It's just a way for us to know that we've already added these keywords into our plan. So that's number one. We've got Valent. Let's remove this filter. What have we got next? Let's go through service cost. Service near me, so cost could be one of them, potentially. Now, you don't want to go too refined because what can happen is Google uses close variance, as we've discussed in terms of keywords. Close variance means that Google can match your search term to other relevant terms, meaning you don't have to be as tightly knit with your ad groups. There are strategies called single keyword ad groups, where some advertisers will literally create an ad group for every single keyword. This is no longer an effective strategy. Google's AI is too smart. They know how to match keywords effectively. The main thing that matters is your ad copy. as long as that matches your keyword targeting and that matches the user's search. That's the important thing. So next, what I'm seeing here, let's start with the very top. We have what I would call generic. So generic keywords are ones that don't really have any kind of modifier on them in terms of types of word. We are targeting boiler servicing, and here's the keyword boiler service. So this is an obvious area for us to add a generic keyword grouping to. So I'm going to add a tab here. I'm going to type in generic. So first of all, these ones are definitely generic. Boiler service near me, gas boiler service. Now, one of them contains gas, which is fine. You could potentially create an ad group for gas, but for the instance of this, it's a boiler service keyword. So I'm going to add these into our boiler service generic keyword list. Oops, let me remove that and type generic up here as a heading. And then drop that in. Oh, go back and copy. And we will drop that in here with a paste. So there's some generics, and then again, going back to what we did before, we're going to do some conditional formatting and make these red. So now we're starting to get through some of these keywords in a bit more detail. We can see Worcester Bosch and Bosch are going to be very important keywords in this list as well. So we've got Bosch. So what I'm going to do again, same principle applies. Go in here, type in Bosch. That'll bring up all of our Bosch keywords, and then we'll just simply copy them in. And we'll add it here and paste them in, and I'll type in Bosch at the top. So now we're starting to group these keywords, and then we'll make these red as well, and then remove the filter. And we'll keep going through this process. There's a lot of keywords in here that we need to group. So this is a very, I suppose, painstaking part of Google Ads, in grouping your keywords. Now, as I said before, Google's keyword planner already groups keywords, but it brings in everything. It's not a very refined list. It means you're going to be bidding on keywords that are not relevant, whereas we know this list right here is highly relevant. So that is the difference, making sure we work with a relevant list and group them effectively. Which is why this process is a much more manual process, but what happens is you come out with a much better campaign, a much more accurate campaign, and a campaign that's going to get great results. So next we can see Baxi is a term here as well. So Baxi is another boiler brand. So if I click that drop down and go to a filter, and I'm going to do a text filter, I'm just going to type into here, I'm going to type in Baxi. And then click OK. And again, these are the Baxi keywords. I'll copy them in. And I'm going to paste them into the next cell over here. And I'm going to type Baxi in here. So if I go back again, make those red to say that we've done them, and remove the filter. Now we're starting to get through quite a good number of keywords here. So with our seed list of keywords, we've got through quite a few, and there's much more to do, however. So let's go back in. Let's do one more. And then what I'm going to do after I show you one more is I'm going to go away and complete this task and come back and show you once it's completed what that looks like and what to expect. So let's do one more. Let's do emergency. So emergency boiler keywords, I know for sure, are going to be higher cost in terms of clicks, because they're generally, as you can see here, £10 a click, as in terms of top of the page bid. Is very rare to find that in this list. 10 is a very high number. And it's because emergencies generally insinuate somebody needs the service now, meaning they're more likely to buy, meaning it's more of a buyer keyword. So that's important to remember as well when you're going through your business and you're trying to understand which keyword is going to be effective. So again, let's go and do emergency. So if I go into here, emergency, you'll see there's a couple in here. Not many, but that's all we need. Emergency boiler service is service near me. Click copy. Paste them in. Emergency. There we go. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ad groups done. I'm going to go back in and make these two red and remove the filter. And we're going to keep going through the same process. And what will happen is, and you typically find this, couple of words of warning. Number one is that you will find that there are going to be keywords that could fit into multiple ad group categories. So for example, we've looked at different brands, and we could also look at emergency. So say for example, we had a keyword in the campaign that came up from our research of Bosch emergency boiler service. That covers both Bosch as a keyword in terms of the brand of the boiler, and it also covers the emergency side as well. In that instance, you have to decide which one is more relevant, because there can't be one keyword in multiple ad groups. You have to choose which one is most relevant. Now, we know that Bosch has more search volume than emergency, but we also know emergency keywords can kind of have a higher conversion rate potentially, because the person is looking for the service now. So it's a balancing act. You know your industry better than most. You know your industry better than Google, in fact. So you need to use your industry insider knowledge when you're doing this to decide which keyword goes into which ad group when they cross over with multiple. Which one is more important, which one is more effective, which one is going to give you the most revenue when you look at the way people search for your products and services. So for me, in that instance, because of the volume involved with Bosch, you could potentially go into Bosch and say, okay, I want this keyword to sit under the Bosch area. But then in this example in particular, I would say it goes under emergency because based on industry knowledge of this area, emergency services are going to be higher converting. So the more keywords with emergency in I can get into that area, into that ad group, the better. So that's what I would do in that instance. Of course, this is a hypothetical. There is no emergency Bosch keyword in this list. Anyway, I hope that clarifies it. I'm going to go away and go through this process and update all the keywords in this campaign into separate ad groups, and then we'll come back and have a look at the work when it's complete. Okay, so all of the keywords are currently in red. So if you saw the previous video, you'll know what that means. It means that all of our keywords have been successfully grouped into ad groups. So if I hop over to the next tab, you will see how I've grouped them. So as you can see here, we have groups for all of these keywords, and they've all been segmented by their main kind of type or activator, as I like to call it. So starting from the left, you have Valent, which is a brand, generic, which is kind of a catch-all for very top-level boiler kind of terms. So boiler service technician, my boiler serviced, or get my boiler serviced, all are very basic, very obvious keywords, which are going to be the majority of them. So you can see that's the longest keyword list we have in the campaign. In terms of ad groups, you have Bosch, which is a brand, Baxi, which is a brand, Emergency is a premium service and something that converts better, so that needs segmenting. Combi is a type of boiler, annual or yearly is people looking for a service plan where they pay monthly. Looking for a plan where they can actually get their boiler service annually, so it's got a kind of annual or yearly kind of intent. Cost, quote, and price is people who are price sensitive, so cheap, cost, how much it will cost, kind of those things. And then you've got local and near, so anything that says near me, or local boiler service near me. And you've got repairs, so servicing and repairs are slightly different. You've got plans as well, so people who want to pay monthly for a service. And you've got this one as well, which is a brand called Glowworm, so another popular boiler brand here in the UK. For argument's sake, you could potentially segment this even more and create even more ad group, but then you have to remember, this is one service for this business. There could be multiple services, so I've got boiler services in here for this particular plumbing business. You might have bathroom installation, you might have plumbing, so all of these different types of campaigns, and there's going to be a point of diminishing returns in terms of time to results if you segment more and more. So this would be classed as a very highly segmented campaign, because if you remember back on the brief, all the services that Bob's Plumbers, which is our example website, has, then you start looking at all the campaigns that we've segmented potentially. We've created one campaign for a single service they provide. And within that campaign, we've created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 ad groups, which is a lot of ad groups for this particular type of campaign without going down the single keyword ad group route. Remember, as I said, Google is smart. Their AI is smart. They understand what the intent is of the person searching, and they can effectively match it to keywords and use close variants as well to make sure you don't miss out on any potential searches as well. So this segmentation is highly effective, and this would be classed as a very segmented keyword list. Again, as I say, you could potentially segment it even further, but the results you'd get as a result of that might not necessarily be in line, particularly when it comes to the fact that when I say you segment into ad groups, the reason you do that is so your ad copy can better reflect the keywords in your ad group. You can make them highly relevant. But with the type of adverts Google now has, where you have multiple headlines and multiple description opportunities, you can cover a lot more ground to make the ads more relevant, and Google will serve the relevant content of your ad depending on headline or description that best meets the needs of the user and is most likely to convert, meaning that this segmentation is highly effective. So even though there are things in an ad group that could cross over, so for example, hot water boiler service and generic boiler service, they're two different distinct keywords. You could potentially, for argument's sake, have a hot water ad group and then target the hot water keywords there. A better way to do this would be, as I've done it now, where we cover off the subject matter of these keywords in the ad content itself, and of course reflects that on the landing page as well. So we're covering the whole way through, and we can make sure we're covering our bases with our ad content, because you can choose multiple headlines and multiple descriptions. So that is why this segmentation is very effective. It gives you a balance of speed and execution and simplicity, which is important as well when managing campaigns. Remember, this is one campaign for a business where they could have 5 or 6 campaigns. Then this makes management a lot easier, but it also segments enough that you get strong results as well. So here I am back in the keyword planner for a very simple reason, and that is to find negative keywords. Now, we spoke about negative keywords earlier in the previous module, and of course these are the types of keyword that block your ads from showing on the search results page. So it's important to find a distinct list of negative keywords in order to preserve your budget, to make sure your ads aren't showing for anything that they shouldn't. And the best place to start before a campaign goes live, because of course when a campaign does go live, you can see what people are typing in to find your ads, so you can block out terms that aren't useful. The best way to do it before going live is to go back to the keyword research that you've done, because the results within there can tell you exactly what Google could match your ads to in order to create negative keywords. So let's run that process now. So I'm going to go on to discover new keywords, and I'm going to do exactly what I did before. I'm going to type in boiler servicing. And I'm going to hit get results. Now, when you hit get results, you're not going to be surprised to see the exact same keywords that I showed you when we first started doing this. But we're going to take a bit of a different turn. We are going to find negative keywords based on this list. So before, where we were looking for things that we wanted to bid on, this time we're going to look for things that are actually going to be something we don't want to target. So perfect example, I'm going to scroll down, and you're going to come across keywords that aren't necessarily going to be in line with what we were trying to do before. So a perfect example of that, for example, is here. You have BG Home Care. This is a business name. You could put this as a negative keyword in your campaign if you didn't want to show for that particular competitor. Another one is oil boiler. So we weren't targeting oil boilers, we're targeting gas boilers in the campaign. So oil boiler could be a negative keyword. We don't want to show for people wanting an oil boiler service, because that's not what the service we provide. So for your business, you need to think, when you go through this research, when you type in your most generic keyword you want to target with your ads, are the keywords in this list anything I want to target? And if they're not, is there a potential that Google might match my query to this particular term? And the answer for this list is yes, because of course, if you bid on the term boiler service as a phrase match keyword, there's no reason Google wouldn't show your ads for oil boiler service. Therefore, if you do not deal with oil boilers, you will need to make oil a negative keyword. So any search term containing oil doesn't trigger your ad. The best way to do this is to have a notepad file handy where you can start adding negative keywords. And if you keep scrolling down, you will see more examples of potential negative keywords that aren't going to work for your business. So as I'm scrolling down, let's have a little look. I'm sure we'll come across another one very, very easily. And we can see here, Checkatrade boiler service. Checkatrade is an aggregator that basically allows people to compare prices and services for particular home care services. So boiler servicing is exactly one of those things. People looking for Checkatrade are looking for a comparison site. Do I want my ads to show when someone types in Checkatrade? Probably, but probably not. If I didn't want them to show for that particular keyword, I would make it a negative as well. Again, commercial. Commercial is a business boiler. So if you work in an office or maybe a hotel or some kind of commercial property, this particular campaign is targeting home boilers, people at home with a boiler. Commercial is not included in the services on the website. So you wouldn't target commercial boiler service. You would target the other regular keywords. So what we're going to do next is start to use a bit more logic to find the negative keywords within this, because you can download this data and comb through it to build a comprehensive list of negative keywords. But some of these refinements on the right hand side here can be very handy to help you on your way as well. As I said, to give you more of an example of what to look for when looking at these refined keywords on the right hand side, this can give you a good source of availability of options to help you find negative keywords. So instead of doing what we did before, where we're looking for positive keywords using this expansion list to kind of see whether or not different areas should be targeted, we're going to use this to find negative keywords. So for example, as I said, all of these other companies are things we shouldn't be bidding on, because if we wanted to target competitors we would set up a separate competitor campaign so we can more effectively target them and make sure that the budget is used more effectively. So with that in mind, we want these to be negative keywords. We'd also want a lot of these contractors to be negative keywords as well, because we wouldn't necessarily want to target them directly in our campaign. So here is a perfect list of examples of negative keywords. As I mentioned before, as you scroll down, you can kind of see the types of services and the types of boiler. Again, that same oil word comes up again. You have gas and oil. This campaign doesn't deal with oil boilers, we deal with gas. So oil is a perfect example of a negative. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump across to my other screen and I'm going to drag over a notepad file. And this is a good place to start when building a negative keyword list. Start adding the keywords that you want to be as negatives in this notepad file. So starting off with the obvious one for me, oil, that would go into this file. We have a list of all these other businesses here. So what we could actually do is we could actually untick everything, scroll down and tick all the contractors and tick all the companies. And then what we can do is download the keywords as a CSV. And you'll start to see that download. And you can open that up. And all of a sudden here, you have a complete list of competing businesses that you can add as a negative keyword so you don't target them. Now, one thing to mention is negative keywords, as I mentioned, work in the same way as positive keywords in that you can have broad, exact, and phrase match negatives, and they work in the same way as the positive keywords. Therefore, with terms like this, where you have actual things you want to target within the negative term, so British Gas, we don't want to target British Gas, but we want to target boiler service. In this instance, we'd want to add all of these as exact match negative keywords. So if you copy this list and then open a new tab and paste it here, I'm going to open this up by double clicking the line between A and B. And I'm going to click down and I'm going to go to row 1 with column B. I'm going to double click and I'm going to press equals to start a formula. And I'm going to type in concat, and that will bring up the concatenate formula. If I double click that, that will start the concatenation process. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this an exact match keyword list by adding square brackets either side of this keyword using a concatenation. So if we start the process off with double quote, opening square bracket, close double quote, then hit comma, then click this cell, then hit comma, and then double quote again. You know what's coming next, don't you? The closed bracket, double quote, and hit enter. That creates an exact match negative keyword. So these exact match keywords, I'm going to double click the corner of here, and that will repeat the formula across everything here. So now we have a good list of exact match negative keywords to add to our negative keyword list. If I hit Control and copy, go back to our notepad file, paste those in, we have a great list of negative keywords added to this file. And I'm going to continue doing this process alongside the manual way, by the way, because as I've mentioned before, the actual fields on this sheet on Google, when you look through this, these filters don't pick up everything. As I mentioned when we're doing the positive keywords, it applies for negative as well. You need to download the entire data, everything, as we did before. So 1,120 keyword ideas. Download these ideas and look through and comb through to find any negatives. So again, oil is okay being a broad match negative because we don't want anything to do with oil at all. So anyone typing oil into their search term, if we use this negative keyword list, our ads won't show for any oil terms. However, as I mentioned, these terms have things in there that might be crossing over with our positive keyword list. So it's important to start them off with a negative match type, with an exact negative match type. So that is the starting point of keyword research for negative keywords. I'm going to go ahead and find more negatives and complete our list. And when you've completed it, be sure to save it because you're going to need it later when we start building the campaign, because that will go into your negative keyword list. So let's talk about text ads, the actual thing that makes people click on your campaign